You know, I love reunions, don't you? Don't you? Yeah? All right. You know, reunions are about reconnecting with folks, even tonight. You know, I see Mark Adams. Mark Adams and I worked together back in Washington many, many years ago. And I'm sure that you've come across a number of people that you've worked with or gone to school with over the years, like I have. You know, relationships, policy is about relationships. Relationships, you know, quite frankly, life is about relationships too. My own personal philosophy, if I can ask for a point of personal privilege, I think relationships are about your relationship with yourself, the relationship that you have with people around you. Some people believe, I believe, relationship with a higher power that connects us to all things, you know, and relationships are important. Like you, I'm really grateful to be here tonight. I'm grateful to be here with my wife. There she is. Wife of 37 years, almost 37 years. My mother-in-law, Dorothy. My son, and his lovely wife, and my granddaughter who's running around, Sydney. I don't know if is she back there? She's out here somewhere. So I'm grateful to be here with them as well. I'm also grateful to be here with my board colleagues, and I'd ask them to stand up for just a second, if you could. Mark Tropy, Moses Garcia, John Gillum, Norm Linsky, Chris Bjornson, Jennifer Pulkidas, Josh, back there in the back. Anybody else? David? All right. You know, I'm also grateful, quite frankly, to the dean and the support that you've given to the association. He's really made the association a priority, and he's put a great team in place, people like Kathy White, Michelle Potter-Bacon. We've got Carolyn Garber here, and Rachel Culo, who is over there in the back. Really a great group of folks to not only support the school, but support what we do as an association. And I think we're really forging a great partnership working together. And the leadership and the credit goes to you to making the Alumni Association a real priority. So thank you. I'm also happy to be here with a couple of former Distinguished Alumni Award recipients. John O'Brien, good to see you. Craig Peterson, who was mentioned earlier, good to see you here as well. So I'm grateful to be here with all of you. You know, relationships are really the essence of what it means to be human. And like tonight, there's really, in my opinion, there's no time where we're more human than when we're interacting with each other. And maybe even more so when we're acting on behalf of others. So, you know, I think LBJ actually understood that. You know, he had a vision of a great society, and he called upon all of us, each of us, to do our part. He established a school to make sure that that progress would continue for years on into the future. And I think tonight we've seen that we've got not only those of us who graduated 30-some years ago, but we've got a lot of folks coming in the pipeline that are going to make a whole lot of difference as they progress through their career as well. You know, if you're a graduate of the school, you're a part of LBJ's living legacy. I think we can all be really proud of that. Each year, one alumnus is selected to be the recipient of the Distinguished Public Service Award. And, you know, it's a way to remind us about the values that the school was founded upon. And, you know, awards have a way of doing that. They remind us of what's important. But I think that the best awards, quite frankly, also remind us about what's best in each of us. And, you know, the Distinguished Public Service Award is just that kind of award. It really reminds us about what's best in each of us. You know, if you're a graduate of the school, you know, one individual is selected, but it's really your award. It's a school award that really highlights what it means to be, you know, a graduate of the school. You know, so I would say that as we're celebrating this year's recipient, that we also take time to celebrate really what is best in each of us, and that we rededicate ourselves to the notion of a great society, and that we celebrate also our role and our responsibility in that society. So with that, set the table. I'm going to ask Moses Garcia to come up and actually introduce our recipient for this year. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mike. Greetings, Dean Hutchings, distinguished speakers, fellow LBJers traveling from near and far. I'd like to first of all echo some of the comments that we spoke about how it was an amazing and historic week here on the LBJ corner of the 40 acres. I followed tweets that Michelle posted on the LBJ Twitter account, online streaming, and I got to watch President Carter speak myself. I was reminded and refreshed to the meaning of civil rights, justice, civic engagement, and the importance of public service. My favorite quote of the week was when President Obama made his remarks on LBJ's leadership and legacy on civil rights, asking, "What the hell is the presidency for?" Well, as I reflected and on these words in my task tonight, I asked myself, what the hell is an LBJ degree for? Since 1972, 3,750 graduates, give or take a few PRs, have walked these halls of Sid Richardson, seeking how to answer this very question. Fellow LBJers make an impact every day in local, state, national, and global settings. Whether you're a recent or seasoned LBJer, a professional colleague, a public administrator, or a good friend of the LBJ School, we all know many examples of how LBJ graduates help build consensus that strengthen communities, advance public interests of the underserved, and demonstrate a meaningful commitment to public service. For over 20 years, the LBJ Alumni Association has chosen to recognize and celebrate a member of the LBJ community who has gone above and beyond in the leadership and commitment to public service. We call this award the Distinguished Public Service Award. Established in 1989, the DPSA has recognized 23 LBJ alumni who have demonstrated exemplary public service and leadership. To be considered, DPSA nominees must have made significant contributions to public policy, such as promoted the advancement of the public affairs vocation, been engaged in community service or volunteerism, shown commitment to the LBJ School and its mission, demonstrated leadership, and shown the ability to work well with diverse people. The LBJ National Alumni Board convened a DPSA selection committee last fall to deliberate on this year's annual recipient. The committee involved several alumni members, an LBJ faculty representative, our LBJ coordinator, Michelle, and the most recent DPSA award recipient. I would like to thank this committee members, Norm Linsky, Kim Springer, John Gillum, Dr. David Warner, Robert Campbell III, and Michelle Potter Bacon. The DPSA committee was proud to select fellow LBJer David Berteau, class of '81, as the 24th recipient of the Distinguished Public Service Award. A recognized expert on government and defense management and public-private issues, Berteau is a senior vice president at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, where he is the director of the National Security Program on Industry and Resources. Previously, Berteau served in the Defense Department for 12 years, serving as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Production and Logistics from 1990 to 1993. He teaches graduate-level courses at the LBJ School, the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, and Georgetown University. Berteau is also an associate of the Robert S. Strauss Center for International Security and Law at the University of Texas at Austin, and a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration. Berteau's DPSA nomination was brought forward by fellow LBJ alumnus, classmate of mine, Eli Massey, who conveyed in his letter of nomination the following, quote, "Many people are recognized as experts on government and defense issues, but David has been repeatedly recognized at the highest levels for his dedication and superior service. Most impressive than just the numbers of times David has been recognized is the humility that David brings to such recognition. For more than all of David's knowledge and accomplishments, I'm proud to support his nomination for the DPSA because of his commitment, compassion, and genuine desire to make the country we live in a better place. Dean Hutchings stated that, quote, "During his remarkable career, David has always remained strongly connected to the LBJ School. His counsel and advice were instrumental in the early stages of the LBJ School's Washington program. And we have been grateful for David's longstanding involvement as an alumnus, scholar, and educator. David is an exemplar of what dedicated and committed individuals can accomplish in the field of public service." Please join me in applause to recognize our 24th DPSA recipient, David Berteau.
Thank you, thank you. You know, I thought this was going to be easy. I do a fair amount of public speaking, and it doesn't usually unnerve me very much. You'd be surprised to know, as a child, I was extremely shy, but I managed to overcome that. I'm so grateful to be standing here today. Dean Hutchins, Mike Moses, fellow alumni, friends, family. I've got so many people to thank for this, and I'm not thanking them for this honor to me, but thanking them for what they've done for all that this stands for. Mike Moses, your comments, especially Mike, brings me back to my time here in this school. It was very nice. I want to thank Lyndon for founding this school so that future presidents could draw on talent that didn't come from the Ivy League. Now, the thing he couldn't predict was that the next two presidents from Texas would be from the Ivy League, but that was not necessarily a shortcoming on his part. I want to thank the state of Texas because they made it possible for me to attend this school by charging a level of tuition, ready for this, $200 a semester. Now, it's gone up a little bit since then, but it's still the best value in public policy education in America. I want to thank the outstanding faculty that helped me hone my thinking, reshape my skills for a life of public service. Barbara Jordan, Dagmar Hamilton, Ken Tolo, Marlon Blissett, Lee Bosk, Dave Warner, Bob Wilson, still here today, still passing that on. Lynn Anderson, all the others. Please join me in thanking them all. Yeah. These folks were not national security experts, and by the way, when I came to the school, I was not going to go into national security either. I started my graduate program here under Jimmy Carter. I graduated under Ronald Reagan. The only jobs were in national security, and it turned out that was a pretty good choice. But they, even if you define that broadly, these were not national security experts, but they were all committed to public service, to the idea that our collective effort in representative government can address individual achievements and joy. I also want to reflect one small moment on one other faculty member, Sidney Weintraub. I took more than a third of my coursework here at the LBJ School. I actually majored in Sid Weintraub at the LBJ School. I later had the privilege of joining the think tank, Center for Strategic International Studies, and Sidney was already in that august institution as the William E. Simon Chair of Political Economy, where he had forged a huge role in creating NAFTA. In fact, he was just here at the school a few weeks ago in the 20th anniversary of NAFTA. I ran into Sidney just a few weeks ago in a restaurant near where he lived, and he seemed to remember me, and I was pleased beyond words. He taught me how to get something done as much as anybody else did. He left this world just 2 days ago. And I would ask you to join me in a moment of silence to honor and remember him. Thank you. Thank you, Sidney. I want to thank my fellow students. There are a few here today. Craig Peterson, John O'Brien, Kim Kronzer, Amy Praskak. Thank you all so much. They preceded and followed me here. And I could take all my time just reflecting on the value of the students that I went to school with here and they've come here since then. I'd also like to thank some of the recent and current students, like Daniel Massey, some of whom are brave enough to take my class in Washington, some of whom are foolhardy enough to actually work for me, and some of whom actually did both, which is just I mean, when you get a day and an evening of David Berteau, you're really getting a full dose, if you say. And I want to thank the faculty who send them there. Ken Flam and Eugene Goltz and Chandler Stope and all the rest. I want to thank my old friend, Austin friends as well. I was in Austin long before I went to the LBJ school. Represented here today by Burgess Jackson. Burgess was co-founder of Wheatsville Food Co-op back in 1976, as were Jane and I. Burgess and I actually met at the produce section, I think, of the Avenues Food Co-op, where it's now long defunct, but we discovered that we held a lot of common passions. Rick Barry, City League softball, and changing the world one transaction at a time, while paying attention to profit and loss statements and balance sheets. We had both experienced co-ops that failed for lack of doing that. It was one of the great things. When I first interviewed in the Defense Department, I was asked the question, what possible relevance does a food co-op service have to working in the Pentagon? And I described for them the dynamics of meetings. And I used as my example a particular meeting at Avenues where we debated whether or not to sell waxed cucumbers. Burgess, you may remember this meeting, right? We spent 3 hours on this, right? The entire assembled co-op membership. And, the wax was potentially carcinogenic, so there were serious personal health as well as policy issues associated with this. It was complicated by the fact that we did not have a reliable supplier for unwaxed cucumbers. So essentially, we had, in essence, all the issues of public policy debates: priorities, trade-offs, what's the role of the governed and the role of the governing. And I said to that group that was interviewing me at the Pentagon, it was a whole table, 3-star general, long-time career, political appointees, et cetera. I said, I've never been in the Pentagon before, but it seems to me that all meetings are wax cucumber meetings. And I suspect you have your share of them here. Well, I got the job. Thank you, Burgess. So, I particularly want to thank my family. My nephew, Matthew Webb, is here. He's a powerful force at the Zach Scott Theater here, and Rebecca, we're here with him. I want to thank my extended family who couldn't come here today. They don't live in Austin, and so it's a little bit longer drive for them. I want to thank my son, Stefan, and my daughter, Celeste. Stefan played in the pools when these gardens here were water. When I was a graduate student, he was born my first semester here at the LBJ school. And his first exposure to computers was riding in a backpack on my back as I was typing out 80-character punch cards to run it through the original LBJ school mainframe to do computer analysis. He's now getting his PhD in neuroscience, so he's learned a lot from that, if you will. And some of you know, before I came to the LBJ school, I was a school teacher. I taught in rural central Texas, and I taught here in Austin. And I will tell you that the greatest public service in America is teaching, especially teaching those who need the help more than, say, some of us do. And that's what my daughter Celeste is doing. She's dedicated her life to teaching, not only to teaching, but to education reform and to education policy. And she's going off shortly to get her second master's degree in education and social research, because she has learned, as we did, those of us who came to this school learned, that there is a very powerful connection between data and analysis and good public policy. So good luck, Celeste. Thanks to my mother and father. They have both departed from this world between last year's award and this year's award. They set me on this course by both living and teaching and talking the responsibilities of citizens from the early days. And ultimately, that is a huge public service as well, is to be a good citizen. And that's what I learned from them. I learned a lot more from them as well. It's a little bit selfish. I kind of wish they could watch this on the web, but I suspect they're getting a great deal of satisfaction and pleasure from it nonetheless. I want to especially thank my incredible and loving wife and lifelong partner, Jane. You know, every dream, every action, every decision that we've made together, and we're a lot better off as a result of that. I hope I get another 40 years with you. That would suit me just fine. Thank you. it's a great gift to be married to and to live with your best friend. And I've had the privilege of that for a long time, so I'm really grateful. There's one final person that I want to thank. And I want to thank this person by telling a little story. When I moved to Austin, I applied to graduate school at the University of Texas, and I was rejected. My grades at Tulane were not all that good as an undergraduate. And so I decided to take some classes and pull my grades up. Took quite a few, took a long time. Along the way, I took a class from Walt Rostow and Elspeth Rostow. The class was taped for replay on television, cable TV, taped over in the audiovisual building over on Guadalupe. And it was about the interaction of domestic politics and foreign policy in the 20th century. Now, this class was 1977, so the 20th century was a good bit shorter, and we didn't have near as much to cover, if you will. But I was an anti-war activist from my early days at Tulane, and I took the class in part because it met a requirement, but in part because I thought I could harass Walt Rostow about Vietnam twice a week on television. And I did. I did exactly that. At the end of every lecture, whether it was about the League of Nations or the Kellogg-Briand Pact or Soviet incursion into Hungary, I raised my hand and I asked a question that brought Walt Rostow to bear on Vietnam. And it got to by about the second or third week, everybody just kept their hands down until I got my turn because it was really a lot of fun for them. Well, I did not change what Walt Rostow felt or thought about Vietnam. Some of you know Rostow was one of the architects of Vietnam policy, both in the State Department under Kennedy and Johnson, and then as National Security Advisor to Lyndon Johnson after George Bundy left. But I did learn three things from doing that. And these were very, very powerful things, and they led me right to where I am today. The first thing I learned was probably that unilateral disarmament by the U.S. was not the path to global peace, at least not a very fast one. Right? And once you realize that, questions of national security essentially become analytic issues. What do you need? How much is enough? How do you make your trade-offs? Those are tough, hard questions, but they're also really interesting, and I've been wrestling with them ever since. The second thing I learned, and I was really struck by Ariel's comments earlier on this, I had a view as a radical activist that you couldn't change the system from within. That by the time, if you tried, by the time you got to the point where you could do something about it, you'd have been co-opted to the degree you would no longer want to. And sitting through Walt and Elspeth Rostow as they talked this week after week, I began to realize what a self-manifesting outcome that guaranteed, because you wouldn't even try. And I realized that maybe, in fact, you can, and it's worth a shot. And the third thing I realized that, well, look, Walt Rostow and Elspeth Rostow were certainly born into a different station of life than I was. They probably didn't have to pick strawberries to learn they didn't want to be a farmer for a living. But that wasn't what brought them to where they were. It was a combination of intelligence and hard work and dedication and vision and public service. And I realized that it's not just those who are born to that who can bring that to bear. It's all of us. That potential is there for all of us. Those three realizations led ultimately to me talking to one of the Rostows. It turns out that the dean of the LBJ school at the time was not Walt, but Elspeth. Right? And she convinced me to apply, and by some incredible stroke of luck, actually by the skin of my teeth, I got in, and I came here, and that turned out to be a very good deal. And 2 years later, I graduated somewhat rambunctiously. I actually didn't have all my degree requirements in place. That last PR went in on the last possible day, as was mentioned earlier. But I ended up at the Pentagon, thanks to an incredible cover letter from Elspeth Rostow, who was clearly fighting on my behalf. I ended up some years later with an outside window office overlooking asphalt on which I had been tear gassed a couple decades before. So it turns out, and ultimately I ended up, among other things, running base closures. And by closing bases, I felt like I probably did more to dismantle a larger portion of the military-industrial complex than any other anti-war activist of my generation, with the complete cooperation of the military. That, my friends, is what the LBJ School can do for you. So my last thank you is really thank you, Elspeth. Thank you, Elspeth Rostow. I got to the Pentagon, And my first office, the Pentagon has these large file cabinets. Other agencies too, but the Pentagon has more of them. They're heavy, they're steel, and you keep classified material in them. They have a combination on them. My first office I moved into, I had to move the safe. I moved that safe. It had obviously not been moved in 12 years. Behind it, sitting, leaning against the wall, was an official presidential portrait of Lyndon B. Johnson. It hangs on my wall today. Because Lyndon is doubly responsible for me being here. First, by escalating the war in Vietnam, he got me very actively interested, knowing that I would be facing a draft, very actively interested in fact, the kinds of national security public policy issues that I still work in today. And then by creating and sustaining this school, he made it possible for me to play that role and serve, if you will. So all those thanks are why I'm standing here today, but especially thanks to all of you for this award. I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause.
Now I have two pictures of Lyndon.
Thank you so much, David. Those remarks were marvelous. There's no better testimony to the spirit of this school than what we just heard just now. We're bringing our evening to a close. I want to just leave you with two numbers. The first is 75. That's the percentage of our graduates who every year, year after year, go into public service. There is no other school, except for the Woodrow Wilson School, which does about the same number, that sends that many graduates into public service year after year. Harvard doesn't do it, SAIS doesn't do it, Georgetown doesn't do it, George Washington, Michigan, Berkeley, none of them do that. We do. The only school that rivals us is the one that has those fabulous scholarships, so they have an unfair advantage. So it's really something about this school that it is deep within our DNA that public service is what we do. The second number is 1. When I arrived, there's a scorecard kept over in the tower about which school or college contributes the most in annual giving in terms of the percentage of alumni who are actually participating. We were near the bottom when I came, thanks to a number of people, including Michelle Potter-Bacon and Carolyn Garber and many others. The second year I was here, we moved up to respectability. The third year, we came in second to the law school, and we were warned that, after you make that kind of surge, you should expect to fall down a couple of notches because people got enthusiastic and then they'll get a little less enthusiastic the next year. So last year, we came in number 1, first. Not in dollar numbers, of course. The law school is much bigger, the business school is much bigger, they make more money, but that's not the metric that really interests me. It's the commitment of alumni, their attachment to this place, their enthusiasm for the place. When I first met David in his office at CSIS, along with Carolyn, we sort of asked, and what was your PR on, and what was your PRP about? He said, well, I'll show you. He reached in his office, all these years later, he had his PRP in his office, 2 of them, and his professional report. So it's just an amazing community, and it's so heartening to see this community gathered here tonight. So it's inspiring. Thank you all for coming back. Don't be strangers. Stay in touch. Those of you living in Washington, watch out. You're going to hear from me big time in the coming years. I'm looking at you, Linsky, and you, David. So thank you all for being here. Now, I think we want to have a photo op with all the prior recipients of the Distinguished Public Service Award somewhere around here. Thank you all for being here, and go get them. Thank you.